March 1st. A reading buddy right there. Right, dog? March 1st. Matthew 8:14-34. Matthew 8:14-34. Jesus heals many people. Jesus heals many people. When Jesus arrived at Peter's house, Peter's mother-in-law was in bed with a high fever. But when Jesus touched her hand, the fever left. She got up and prepared a meal for him. That evening, many demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. All the spirits fled when he commanded them to leave, and he healed all the sick. This fulfilled the word of the Lord through Isaiah, who said, "He took our sicknesses and removed our diseases." The cost of following Jesus. When Jesus noticed how large the crowd was growing, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. Then one of the teachers of religious law said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you no matter where you go." But Jesus said, "Foxes have dens to live in and birds have nests, but I, the Son of Man, have no home of my own, not even a place to lay my head." Another of his disciples said, "Lord, first let me return home and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me now. Let those who are spiritually dead care for their own dead." Jesus calms the storm. Then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. Suddenly a terrible storm came up, with waves breaking into the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went to him and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." And Jesus answered, "Why are you afraid? You have so little faith." Then he stood up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly all was calm. The disciples just sat there in awe. "Who is this?" they asked themselves. "Even the winds and waves obey him." When Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake in the land of Gadarenes, two men who were possessed by demons met him. They lived in a cemetery and were so dangerous that no one could go through that area. They began screaming at him, "Why are you bothering us, Son of God? You have no right to torture us before God's appointed time." A large herd of pigs was feeding in the distance. So the demons begged, "If you cast us out, send us into that herd of pigs." "All right, go," Jesus commanded them. So the demons came out of the men and entered the pigs. And the whole herd plunged down a steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby city, telling everyone what had happened to the demon-possessed men. The entire town came out to meet Jesus, but they begged him to go away and leave them alone. That was Matthew chapter 8, verse 13-34. Now we're in Leviticus 1 and 2. Procedures for the burnt offerings. The Lord called to Moses from the tabernacle and said to him, "Give the following instructions to the Israelites. Whenever you present offerings to the Lord, you must bring animals from your flock and herds. If your sacrifice for a whole burnt offering is from the herd, bring a bull with no physical defects to the entrance of the tabernacle, so it will be accepted by the Lord. Lay your hand on its head, so the Lord will accept it as your substitute, thus making atonement for you. Then slaughter the animal in the Lord's presence. And Aaron's sons, the priests, will present the blood by sprinkling it against the sides of the altar that stand in front of the tabernacle. When the animal has been skinned and cut into pieces, the sons of Aaron, the priest, will build a wood fire on the altar. Aaron's sons will then put the pieces of the animal, including the heads and fat, on the wood fire. but the internal organs and legs must first be washed with water. Then the priest will burn the entire sacrifice on the altar. It is a whole burnt offering made by fire, very pleasing to the Lord. If your sacrifice for a whole burnt offering is from the flock, bring a male sheep or goat with no physical defects. Slaughter the animal on the north side of the altar in the Lord's presence. Aaron's sons, the priest, will sprinkle its blood against the sides of the altar. Then you must cut the animal into pieces, and the priest will lay the pieces of the sacrifice, including the head and the fat, on the top of the wood of the altar. The internal organs and legs must be first washed with water. Then the priest will burn the entire sacrifice on the altar. It is a whole burnt offering made by fire, very pleasing to the Lord. If you bring a bird as a burnt offering to the Lord, choose either a turtle dove or a young pigeon. The priest will take the bird to the altar, twist off its head, and burn the head on the altar. He must then let the blood drain out against the sides of the altar. The priest must remove the crop and the feathers and throw them to the east side of the altar among the ashes. Then, grasping the bird by its wings, the priest will tear the bird apart, though not completely. Then he will burn it on the top of the wood fire of the altar, on the altar. It is a whole burnt offering made by fire, very pleasing to the Lord. Procedure for the grain offering. When you bring a grain offering to the Lord, the offering must consist of choice flour. You are to pour olive oil on it and sprinkle it with incense. Bring this offering to one of Aaron's sons, and he will take a handful of flour mixed with olive oil together with all the incense and burn this token portion on the altar fire. It is an offering made by fire, very pleasing to the Lord. The rest of the flour will be given to Aaron and his sons. It will be considered a most holy part of the offering given to the Lord by fire. When you present some kind of baked bread as grain offering, it must be made of choice flour with olive oil, but without any yeast. It may be presented in the form of cake mixed with olive oil or wafer spread with olive oil. If your grain offering is cooked on a griddle, it must be made of choice flour and olive oil. It must contain no yeast. Breaking it into pieces and pour oil on it. It is the kind of grain offering. If your offering is prepared in a pan, it must also be made of choice flour and olive oil. No matter how a grain offering has been prepared before being offered to the Lord, bring it to the priest, who will present it at the altar. The priest will take a token portion of the grain offering and burn it on the altar as an offering made by fire. It will be very pleasing to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering will be given to Aaron and his sons as their food. It will be considered a most holy part of the offering given to the Lord by fire. Do not use any yeast in any grain offering you present to the Lord, because no yeast or honey may be burnt as an offering to the Lord by fire. You may add yeast and honey to the offering presented at the harvest, but these must never be burnt on the altar as an offer pleasing to the Lord. Season all your grain offerings with salt to remind you of God's covenant. Never forget to add salt to your grain offerings. If you presented grain offerings to the Lord from the first portion of your offering, bring kernels of new grain that have been roasted on the fire. Since it is a grain offering, put olive oil on it and sprinkle it with incense. The priest will take a token portion of the roasted grain mixed with olive oil together with all the incense and burn it as an offering given to the Lord by fire. Leviticus 1 and 2. And finishing up today with Proverbs 19. Proverbs 19. It is better to be poor and honest than to be a fool and dishonest. Zeal without knowledge is not good. A person who moves too quickly may go the wrong way. People ruin their lives by their own foolishness, and then are angry at the Lord. Wealth makes many friends. Poverty drives them away. A false witness will not go unpunished, nor will a liar escape. Many beg favors from a prince. Everyone is the friend of a person who gives gifts. If the relatives of the poor despise them, how much more will the friends avoid them? The poor call after them, but they are gone. To acquire wisdom is to love oneself. People who cherish understanding will prosper. A false witness will not go unpunished, and a liar will be destroyed. Isn't it right for a fool? It isn't right for a fool to live in luxury or for a slave to rule over princes. People with good sense restrain their anger. They earn esteem by overlooking wrongs. The king's anger is like a lion's roar. His favor is like dew on the grass. A foolish child is a calamity to a father. A nagging wife annoys like a constant dripping. Parents can provide their sons with an inheritance of houses and wealth, but only the Lord can give an understanding wife. A lazy person sleeps soundly and goes hungry. Keep the commandments and keep your life. Despising them leads to death. If you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord, and he will repay you. Discipline your children while there is hope. If you don't, you will ruin their lives. Short-tempered people must pay their own penalty. If you rescue them once, you will have to do it again. Get all the advice and instruction you can and be wise the rest of your life. You can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. Loyalty makes a person attractive, and it is better to be poor than dishonest. Fear of the Lord gives life, security, and protection from harm. Some people are so lazy they won't even lift a finger to feed themselves. If you punish a mocker, the simple-minded will learn a lesson. If you reprove the wise, they will be all the wiser. Children who mistreat their father or chase away their mother are a public disgrace and an embarrassment. If you stop listening to instruction, my child, you have turned your back on knowledge. A corrupt witness makes a mockery of justice. The mouth of wicked gulps down evil. Mockers will be punished, and the backs of fools will be beaten. Proverbs 19. And that's it for the day. Stay blessed.